welcome. We're here to celebrate, a big celebrate, of Merle's accomplishments and her first book, which is Gripped by Guyana, a memoir of purpose and adventure. Just to give you an idea of how the evening's going to progress, you're going to listen to me for a bit. I've been honored to introduce Merle, and I'm going to give those of you who are non-writers a little bit of context to show you what a huge accomplishment it really is. Merle will then talk to you about why she chose to undertake to write this book about Guyana. She'll read a few brief excerpts. I hope they're the best bits. And she's going to respond to the idea of what the journey was like from concept to tonight, the launch. And later she'll answer some questions. Once that's done, Merle will sit at the table behind me and sign books for you all, and she'll personalize them. And a word here that if you want to buy books for gifts to give to family and friends, you'll have to order them. And we will take the orders at the end. With regard to payment, once she's signed the books and you've got them in your hand, you'll go into the little room behind you through that doorway on the right, and Dale, there she is at the back, will sort out the funds for you, and you can exit through the lobby because there's a door into the lobby. Okay? So, I have the privilege of introducing Merle, who happens to be a very good friend and a writer colleague. And I am not ashamed to say that I'm biased. Okay? It's not like doing a book review for somebody you've never met or heard of. She's a best friend, so I'm biased. And tonight is the culmination of 4 years of extremely hard work, a high level of learning, and it sounds like a long time, but she was faster than most first-time authors. The average is 7 years for your first book. My first one took 11. So she did it in double quick time, for which she should be congratulated. Now, I see a lot of people here who actually aren't in the writing community here. And I'm going to give you some context about why it's such hard work and why it takes so long and what it's like to go through it, which I'm sure Merle will enlarge upon later. No one has any idea, if they're not a writer, the amount of work they're facing when they get the idea. Most people think we wake up one morning and we have this immense idea for a book, and it comes to you fully formed, organized. All you have to do is find your computer, put your paws to keyboard, and the story pours out. Nothing is further from the truth. That does not happen. The process is actually fraught with ups and downs, frustrations, and many, many revisions. And the biggest thing you have to deal with is self-doubt. Even with book number 4, you get to the middle of it and you think, I can't do this anymore. You compare yourself with other writers and you find yourself lacking. So you have to get over it. The number 8 comes to mind for me, and I think that's the number of draft manuscripts Merle wrote. Is it around 8?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. I read 5 of them, including the last one. The rule of thumb that we work with is it's 30% research, 30% creative writing, and 30% editing and revision. If you write non-fiction, the research takes up a lot of that. The creative writing bit is much smaller and the editing is the same. So, authors obviously need support. But you write by yourself, right? So where are you going to find it? Merle had the wisdom to join the South Okanagan Writers League feedback group right from the beginning, pretty much, wasn't it? It was right near the beginning. And this feedback group has writers of all ages, all levels, and all genres. And they provide you with the advice that you need to write for publication for a general readership. And let me tell you, it ain't the same as high school English, university English, or even J school, journalism school. It's a whole different set of rules. And I don't think Merle will mind, but she said to me the other day, converting it from academe to story for general readers was a struggle. And Merle is nothing if not determined. And the feedback group provided her with how to do it, and she slowly began to improve. Another reason she got over the hurdle was the encouragement of other writers. So we're not sitting in splendid isolation all the time. We need that psychological help, and we need the mechanical help for grammar and all that sort of thing. Writing is actually a team sport. Remember that. Merle did another good thing, a second very important thing, which was to hire a professional freelance editor who only works with people who are aiming for publication. She knows the rules and the conventions that will get you high marks from an acquisition editor. And I think she was a bit surprised when she got the first report back, which was quite lengthy, and masses of revisions all over the manuscript. And it took her a long while to sort them out. But I will tell you this, when she'd done the work, which probably took, a couple of months?
6 to 7 months.
6 to 7 months. Okay. The story was beginning to sing. So these two decisions, the feedback group and the editor, were, I think, they lie at the core of her success, the where she's got to today. But the work's not yet over. She's only done the first third of it. Next came the preparation for publishing, to pitch her memoir to Canadian publishers. And it entails writing a proposal. And it's a business case for your book. Susan's nodding knowingly. I can see why. It's a very long document. It contains an overview, a full marketing and sales analysis, a review of the recent competitors to your book, and a very detailed promotion plan that you will put into effect once it's published. And it takes a lot of research. And it's got to be quantitative. You have to know and be able to tell your publisher what sales you can expect. And for most people, this first time effort, they've got no idea. So you have to do your homework. And then at the very end of that, you have hopefully added to your team published writers who've done it before you and have also written query letters, which is the first thing you send to the publisher before you send the proposal. Now, Merle did this during the pandemic, right? It was a boon in one way because we couldn't go out. We couldn't go and see people. So she could get her head down and do the hard work of writing and research. But it was a curse when it came to the publishers. The publishing industry around the world is risk averse. But in the pandemic, they were severely so. And so, looking at a first-time, unproven author, they just weren't doing it. They were hedging their bets and publishing the authors they were comfortable with and had published before. And memoirs are a difficult sell in good times, but during the pandemic, the publishers were only publishing memoirs of celebrities. Think Michelle Obama, okay, with her first book. Huge amount of sales. If I'd done it, little old Julie Ferguson, okay, I wouldn't have stood a chance. Nobody's ever heard of me. So why would a publisher accept it from me? They wouldn't. So she plugged away, and she had hedged her bets, and she was ready to self-publish. This was another vertical learning curve for Merle, and her team of helpers grew again. Hello, Bruce, you helped a lot. So you see, this team thing around you is essential to be successful. So the final result is a cracking good book. It's got an eye-catching, stunning cover of her own batik, I might add. Inside, it follows all the rules of a publishing house. The layout is very easy to read, and she even embedded images, which is unbelievably difficult because they bop around unexpectedly. So, what I would bring your attention to with regard to this book are Merle's keen observation skills. And she has a very lovely use of language, which is quite unique. And both those things lift this memoir way above the ordinary memoir that you tend to read. You're going to enjoy a very wry sense of humor, which is quite uniquely Merle, and it's generally directed at herself. I'm not going to talk about the content, because she will, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's about Guyana. I think you knew that. It's about her volunteer work with Cuso International. But you've got her experience in a very different culture from ours in global north. She explored the country with great gusto and had lots of adventures, which I won't tell you what they are, but they're definitely adventures. And she explored the extraordinary biodiversity in Guyana. Birds mostly, but mammals too. What you will learn is how she was able to develop the trust of the indigenous villagers with whom she worked. And she empowered them to embrace ecotourism to improve their lives. And you'll also experience her ups and downs and frustrations and joy while she was working to succeed in the mandates that were given her by Cuso International. So it's hard to pinpoint what this book is exactly about. It's good for travelers, globetrotters, but also armchair travelers. It's good for birders and those who like handcrafts, and you'll see some of the Guyanese handcrafts over there and Merle's embroidery. For me, I was fascinated by the history of the Indigenous and the colonial side of Guyana. I actually am very interested in the country, and I have a feeling that she may be mentioning it later. Why? I also am of the opinion, because over these years I've got to know her quite well, and I think Guyana changed her. How? I'm not going to tell you. It's all in here. It's not overtly stated, but you'll get it when you finish the book. So I consider this book to be a triumph of solo effort and fascinating content. So, with great, great pleasure, I'm introducing you to Merle Kindred, our Merle.
Thank you, Julie, for a truly wonderful introduction to the whole business of what it is to be a writer and what it is to be a published writer. That last title I've only experienced for less than a month. I woke up April 1st to an email that said I was published. I said, yeah, right, this is April Fool's Day. And then I go, wait a minute, this is from Amazon. It was true, I was published. The book was finished at midnight on March 31st. So I now am, in fact, a published writer. It has been... What's that?
Published author.
Oh, yeah, she keeps correcting my language. I always just say writer, and she's been saying author, so I'm working on it. She's even, she's even put it on the stickers. I guess I should put it where it says meet the author. Okay, I'll put it right here, Julie, so I say it right. Okay. Yes, and it's been an incredible journey, as Julie has told you. It's been an incredible month. I was suddenly thrown into having the book here and things that, also I forgot my speaking notes at home, it's just, and I forgot the Guyanese embroidery that was done in the interior. It was a beautiful piece of hand embroidery, and I've had people in BC turn it around and say, oh, it must be machine embroidery. I said it was done in the deep interior. They don't have sewing machines. They don't even have electricity. I said, no, this is hand done. Anyway, it's been quite a month. There was interest. Oh, I should mention, yes, Julie saw this. She knew what I was going to show. Julie was interested in me, interested in my writing, we found out later, interested in the fact that we're both born in the same year. So we decided we're kind of twins, except she was born in the UK and I was born in Canada. But Julie is also a published writer of great renown, a published author. And she publishes for one of Canada's major publishing houses, Dundurn. This is about James Douglas, father of British Columbia. How many of you know who James Douglas is? Yes. Guess where he was born? Guyana. No. You're right. You're right. He was born in Guyana. His mother was Barbadian. She was from Barbados, and his father was Scottish. That's so. Julie says he was black. It's true. And he married a woman who was Indigenous here. So, interesting. What's happened soon after the book came out is something came online. How many of you know about this journal, this glossy journal? It comes out of Kelowna. It's been published quarterly about for about 10 years. And it's published on the solstice months and the equinox months. It's sort of a new thought, new age publication. Anyway, I knew about it when I first came to Penticton a dozen years ago. I think I'd read one issue online, and I read another issue, ordered it, and lo and behold, I thought, you know what? I think there's something about my book that could end up in this magazine. So I sent them a proposal. I will be in the June.
No.
And it's available in free form or online. Okay. And also, I've been in touch with people that I know in Guyana, and I know the very best tourist magazine coming out of Guyana is called Explore Guyana. They're going, when I found this out 2 weeks ago, they were going to print in 3 weeks. I've already put in a full day's work. In a solid 7 hours today, I submitted 2 articles and a whole raft of pictures for the Explore Guyana 2023 and 24 issue. I'll let you know when it's available. I've had emails from family and friends in the UK, all over Canada, the US, Guyana, of course. Did I say Finland? India, even Namibia, saying, oh, the book is ready. So it's, I think, definitely going global. And I'm also joining other Cuso volunteers who have returned. This is a book that came out last year by a friend of mine, Nancy Christine Edwards. She published not one, not even one, a memoir of the life-altering experiences in Sierra Leone, West Africa. She was in public health as a young woman. She's a little younger than I am. And she published this book last year, and she went on to a really remarkable medical career. She's retired now as she's professor emerita of nursing from the University of Ottawa. So we've been in touch probably for almost 3 years now, every couple of weeks, swapping ideas, information, things, research that we've come up with about writing and publishing. And I owe a great deal to my friend Nancy. And her book is a really fine read also. What else did I leave home that I was supposed to? I'm a little tired. I had to take not one but 2 naps today. And then I said, I think I'm fading. And I said, maybe you should eat something. I go, good idea. So anyway, let me get on with the show. You need to know a little bit of my background, and I'll try to go through it as quickly as possible. To understand where I got to the point where I did what I did in Guyana. I was born just after the Second World War ended, and sorry, Julie, that tells your age also.
That's fine.
And is that okay? All right. And which meant I came of age in the 1960s. And even though I was born in Toronto of Canadian parents, Canadian Saskatchewan homesteading stock, my father's work was in the U.S. And so we ended up in the Detroit area, Motor City. And that meant in the 60s, it was the Vietnam War, it was civil rights going on. There was also, there were riots in Detroit, race riots in Detroit. Women's lib was coming in. Environmental consciousness just started to hatch with Rachel Carson's The Silent Spring in 1962. I was there for all of that. It was a very tumultuous time. I remember at my university at one point, undergrad work about 25 miles north of Detroit, and I ended up saying, stop guys, stop. standing in the middle of a mob of white students and a mob of black students. I don't know why I was there. That was not a really bright thing to do, but at least I didn't get punched out and, I don't know, the campus police came or something. It was a very difficult time. I graduated in 1967, and I decided to leave town. So I also have a resident alienship status in the U.S. at that time. And so I said, I'm out of here. I'm going to go anywhere but around here. So signed up for Volunteers in Service to America. It's basically a domestic organization like Peace Corps, only I didn't want to stay domestic. So I got a telegram saying I was assigned to the U.S. Virgin Islands. I said, that's really great. Where are they? So got the old atlas out at home and found out where I was heading. So I was there for a year. And it was probably a good thing that I was leaving. The U.S. Air Force was very interested in me with a name like Merle. And I'm thinking, fellas, I won't pass the physical. There's something to be expecting that I don't have. So anyway, I was in the U.S. Virgin Islands setting up preschools, setting up village health care clinics, and doing remedial reading classes. It was great. The U.S. Virgin Islands used to be the Danish West Indies. So in Fort Christianshavn, where I had classes, there was a cannon outside. So I told students, if I have any problems with you, I'm stuffing you in the cannon. See, I've never been able to say that in a classroom since. It was a great year. After that, I headed for University of Toronto. I wanted to go live in Canada, in my hometown. So I spent a couple of years there. They were so terrific. The university sent me hints for someone coming out of the Virgin Islands, that Canada was going to be kind of cold. And I said, okay. So I was there for a couple of years. Then I was 10 years back, roughly almost a decade back in the States. Got an itchy foot again. I'm not sure if it's a foot or wheels that I have, but anyway. And I'd heard about Cuso International. So I found out there was a position doing something I'd been doing in the States, which was teaching reading, remedial reading in the States. They were training teachers in Jamaica to do primary school and junior secondary reading. So I thought about it. 2 years in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Okay. Had a great time, did really terrific work, enjoyed it immensely, learned how to scuba dive, and it was wonderful. And it was so great, I stayed on for another 6 years, but went up to the Bahamas and spent 6 years there doing the same kind of work. That's where my book cover came from. I was learning batik from a friend in the Bahamas, and that's what I found a picture in National Geographic, and that it turned into that. So when I was thinking book cover, and I sat there looking at my living room wall, as I told friends, I go, book cover. Julie says it's really making a big hit, and I'm getting a lot of positive response.
It really catches your eye.
It does catch your eye. So
The book covers at the moment are pretty bland and dull. And that sticks out like a sore thumb.
yes, it does. And you're telling me that I should offer the book to what's his name? Keith. Who's the BBC or the Global BC?
Oh, Keith Baldwin.
Yes, that I should send him. Yes, because
Yeah, Bruce did.
and that because he has a bookshelf.
That's right, and during the news, I'm always looking like, what was it called? Yes, send him a copy.
So yes, I will. Yes. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so where are we now? We're in Jamaica. We're out of the Bahamas. We've left the Bahamas. We're now back in the States for a period of time, and I get married to an architect who's been working on energy efficient architecture even before it was a known thing in the U.S. He was also Canadian too. He He was from St. John, New Brunswick. So Uncle Hugo in Dunblane, Saskatchewan, told me, he said, "You're marrying a herring choker." My husband said, "Well, your uncle's a gopher choker." They loved each other. They had great times together. So that was, and then morphed into my husband Skip and I thinking that there might be a way to get the idea of energy efficient housing promoted to a greater extent by using whatever's out in technical communication. So I started a PhD, at that time we were in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Keweenaw Peninsula. It's a very handy state, Michigan. Right thumb knuckle, that's where we lived, Keweenaw Peninsula. It gets 20 feet of snow a year. It blows in from a place called Canada. Okay. And so I did. I started the degree in the year 2000, and my husband died of a massive heart attack 6 weeks before the program started.
Oh, dear.
So he never got to know what it was like getting me to go through a PhD program for his work. Anyway, next stage was at the time that I was about to had my dissertation proposal in, I'd been at the university doing courses for 4 years, had the proposal in, was going to look at alternative communication strategies for energy efficient design and talk about the sort of groundbreaking work that Skip had been doing in his career. And I was invited to India by folks that I knew just for a holiday, spring break, went off to India for a couple of weeks sort of thing. Sitting there drinking Indian beer, Kingfisher beer, sitting in Goa on the shores of the Arabian Sea, I said, I need to write about the topic from an Eastern perspective as well as a Western perspective. So I hot-footed it back to the UP, and my dissertation chair said, "You were only gone 2 weeks. What happened to you?" I said, "Well, I don't know." "Well, do you know how you're going to do this?" I said, "I haven't a clue, but I'm going to do it." Things happened. That was May of 2004. Oh, and I showed up on exactly the day that somebody called Sonia Gandhi took power in India. I said, "Who's Sonia Gandhi?" Anyway. I didn't think Gandhi had a granddaughter, or daughter or granddaughter. Anyway, so the next month, May of 2004, a friend up in the UP handed me a copy of an article on a place called Kerala in India, which is one of the most progressive states in India. The other one is West Bengal. Interesting. The next month, June of 2004, I go to an American Solar Energy Society conference because Skip and I had always attended their conferences, and there was a young architect from Portland, Oregon, who was doing a paper on a fellow named Laurie Baker, a master architect from the UK who'd been in Kerala since the end of the Second World War, and had helped establish the center, Cosford, the center of, I can't even say the name of it, even though I was there for 12 years, on and off. Center of Science and Technology for Rural Development. I should have made my naps a little bit longer. Anyway, I was there in and out of Kerala over the course of the next 10, 12 years. I stopped going when I had done as much work as I could, volunteer consultancy on management of architectural practices, and also getting the name of the organization out globally. But I figured I'd given all that I could from my skill set. They had taken all that they wanted from me, and I needed to stop. So I came out of India in the spring of 2016. And about A couple months later, the foot got itchy again. So I wondered what was Cuso up to these days? And then I heard about, now they were doing 6-month postings and selecting a variety of locations. And I looked at a posting I thought I could do in a place called Guyana. People said, oh, you're thinking about going to Africa? I said, no, actually, I'm going to South America. And I did. I was going to go in and do a strategic plan for a small youth organization in Georgetown, and that was fine. I prepared for Guyana. You travel light, you have your day pack, you have your small carry-on bag. I kept my tech equipment with me and clothes in a duffel bag, and off you go. So the book will tell you about how that first 6-month posting went. And it was okay. But I also spent time in the hinterlands, which isn't a negative term in Guyana. I spent a fair bit of time there also. The other thing I forgot was the bringing my copy of the book so that I knew which pages I was going to read. But fortunately, in my little black book, I knew I'd put down the pages I'd selected here. So Julie tells me that I'm to provide 3 passages, fairly short. One should be humorous, one should be action, and one should be a turning point. So I said, okay, H-A-T. I said, oh, kind of a hat trick. So first of my hat tricks, here we are. So this is the, I'll let you determine whether it's the humorous, the action, or the turning point passage. I had a 21-year-old flatmate for a couple of months until her posting finished. She was from Nova Scotia. She was 21. I was 71. I was 21 when I went off to the U.S. Virgin Islands. It was a real shock. Anyway, I never achieved Carolyn's level of culinary skill. However, after her departure, I tinkered with even more curry and cook-up combinations. My first big success with Guyanese cuisine was memorable. I had wrestled with beans and rice, vegetables and spices all afternoon, remembering tips from Carolyn and Captain. She'd learned how to cook this because there was a House of Flavors in Georgetown, and Captain had invited her into the kitchen and showed her how to do the basic Guyanese cook-up. I wanted this cooking caper to be at least passable. I was tackling cook-up, the first to make a public appearance. I didn't know if I was brave or foolish to try the classic Afro-Guyanese dish along with the Indo-Guyanese curry. Together, the combo would be a tasty meal, or so I hoped. After my cooking frenzy, where I chopped, mixed, and steamed up the kitchen, I wrapped my casserole dish and headed down the dirt path beside the nearby narrow paved street. I was off to a potluck hosted by 2 Cuso colleagues a short distance away. When passing several shops, I heard roadside voices across the way. "Miss, that sure do smell fine," said one of the gray-haired regulars on this route. He was dressed in his usual khaki shirt and shorts. He roosted on what looked to be his favorite bench across the street from a food shop and added, "Will you marry me?" "Not him, miss. Him eat too much," said his neighbor, of similar vintage, also tappily dressed, on the bench under the coconut palm. He poked his friend in the ribs and said, "I have much more manners." "Sorry, fellows," I replied with a grin as I clutched my towel-wrapped casserole. "Haven't time to get married today, maybe tomorrow." "We be waiting," said the first fellow, and both laughed and slapped their thighs. Then he added, "And that dog following sure do like the smell of your cooking too." I laughed over my shoulder and trotted onward along the dusty path, crossing the bridge over the weed-choked canal to my destination 2 blocks away. I continued chuckling over the marriage proposal based on scent. So it was a great first 6 months there. I spent time in the interior at one point. I'd arrived just before Easter of 2017, and we had 4 days off. And I brought some extra money. I knew I wanted to be able to get into some eco lodges and check out some of the indigenous territory in the country. So I headed off, had a great time, which you'll read about in the book. And there was also tension during that first year. And I guess I can go straight into the next passage, which is on page 75. Got a call in July. I was in an apartment, lived in a compound where the family's home was out front, and then they had built sort of an apartment building. And Cuso would only rent second floor apartments because flooding is a huge issue in Guyana. They're 6 feet below high tide. Mm-hmm. And there's a huge 280-mile long seawall. It's about as high as I am tall along the north coast. But nevertheless, that was built back in the middle of the 19th century. Okay, let's see, page 75. Here we go. I had just been hearing about wildfires in over 250 wildfires blazing in BC, etc., etc. Let's see, and I wondered if flood or fire might affect my home, but let concerns fade as there was nothing I could do. Suddenly, more news arrived. On what should have been a quiet Sunday, the phone rang. It was Vanessa. She was my program manager. How are you doing today? Are you at home? Oh, I'm fine. I'm here in my apartment. What's up? There's a situation underway, and we've received word from the Canadian High Commission to alert all volunteers. There's rioting at the prison in Georgetown, and the facility is on fire. We're asked to take extra precautions for volunteer safety. After a startled pause, I said, I appreciate the information. I'm here in the family compound and feel quite safe. I'll stay put and speak with them. We're asking volunteers to maintain their schedule of work and visits to the office and essential outings such as marketing, if possible. We're also asking everyone to remain alert and based at home after dark until the situation is stabilized. I'll let you know whether we'll be meeting at the office tomorrow as soon as I contact regional headquarters in Jamaica. When our brief conversation ended, I went to the balcony and saw smoke to the west. I ran my fingers over the table and saw gray ash. A family member was on the nearby landing of a staircase at the back of their home. Have you heard about the prison riot and burning? I asked. Yes, he said with an odd smile, which I didn't know how to interpret. I've just had a call from my program manager. We're asked to remain close to home, but continue with our work routine. I told her that I feel safe here with you and your family. I said as I brushed ash from the railing. Yes, you'll be fine. By the way, how far are we from the prison? Oh, it's way the other side of the city, about 2 kilometers. We'll be fine here. 2 kilometers? I guess this was considered far away in Georgetown. You can decide which part of the hat trick that was, Dale. Oh, 5 minutes, okay. I've asked Dale to keep track. The second year was a surprise. I hadn't planned to stay on. At the end of my first 6 months, I was birding up the northeast coast of Guyana, or the northwest coast, which is pictured on this map. And I was into a couple of indigenous territories. I photographed a bird that's very shy and very rare. It's called the crimson hooded manakin. I brought it back to Guyana, shared it with birding experts there. It was put online and it went viral, like 500 hits the first day. And I realized in the time I'd spoken to indigenous people in the interior and up in the northwest that they really wanted to promote ecotourism, to focus on the wealth of their ecological environment. Guyana has 80% of its rainforest intact, and it's considered a biodiversity hotspot on the planet. So I went back to Georgetown and asked Vanessa, I said, do you think Cuso would be interested in a placement for an ecological and economic development advisor? I said, I know you're short-staffed right now. How about if I write the placement? Guess what? Cuso said yes. So I went back 3 months later. That would have been January of 2018. I was there for 6 months, and I was basically in Indigenous territory between Georgetown and Region 2. It would take me about 4.5 hours by road and river travel. Take a water taxi, take road travel, take a boat on the Pomeroon, and so on. And it was you'll read what happened. Since Dale's given me the countdown, we do want to give time for Q&A. You might have a question or two for me about all of this. I'm going to read the last excerpt that I planned for you. And this happened just before I left the country. Cuso paid for myself and 4 young people from the village of Akawini. They ranged in age from 16 to 21, 1 fellow and 3 girls, and 3 young women. And we were flown into the interior so they could actually see how Indigenous-run eco-lodges were handled. Let's see, I hope I got the page right. Where's the villagers? No, that's not the right page number. You wrote it down incorrectly, Merle. Let's see if I can find it. I think I can. Hang on. I'm getting there. Pretty soon you can think up some questions for me. I found it. 214 is not 236. Okay. Anyway, with the Akawini training so close to the end of my posting, I wouldn't have time to return to the village to do a debriefing. There would be an election of all the Tushaus, that's the village chiefs, and a general meeting in each village in Guyana the week after our return. In preparation for this occasion, I asked each person to share a portion of the trainings with their community. Tabita had said, I'll discuss the staffing arrangements at Sarama and also talk about Rockview and Bina Hill and how they're run. Daisy said, I'll tell them about the purpose and benefits of ecotourism and all the basic objectives we've heard about. Jacob said, I'll chair the meeting and fill in details about the buildings and the local youth groups. Candace, what will you talk about? I asked. After a moment, she said, I'll talk about how the village council and the tourism management committee must work together to make tourism successful. I was beyond happy with their responses. And then I cued the young people, about transportation arrangements for getting them home, etc. And I think I'll leave it at that. I came home in July of 2018, and the foot didn't itch the same way it has at other points in my life. I realized that it was time for me to travel back in memory and go through my journals, and it was now time to write why I have done these kinds of things for over 50 years. And so that's what I did. And it took me a touch over 4 years to pull this off, as Julie indicated.
Wow. Thank you for your kind attention. And now I open it to Q&A. You can ask me anything about Guyana, about what my thoughts and feelings were there, anything you want. It's open season. Yes, Cheryl.
Did you ever feel unsafe?
Yeah, when that fire was burning in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Victorian era prison which had room for about 300, maybe 400 prisoners, and it was stuffed with over 1,000. So yes, it was. It
What
was,
about the taxi drivers?
The taxi drivers? They were fine. Although I do talk about Linton. He was my favorite taxi driver. There were a couple times where, in one case, a taxi driver was angry, and he was taking myself and another friend what was going to be an hour's drive out of the city. And so I tapped him on the shoulder. He was talking to someone on his cell phone. I said, "Give me your phone." And he gave it to me, and I said, "You'll get it back when we get to our destination safely." But I said, "You'd get us there, you slow down, I'm the one driving. You're driving, I'm running this car. If we feel unsafe, we're going to stop and get out and not pay you." That was the end of that story. And another time, we just picked up a car in town, and that's how we'd get around. And taxis were very cheap. And the young fellow was sweet-talking some gal on his phone, and I was driving with Eon, who's Afro-Guyanese, and he was sitting in the front seat, I was in the back. And so I just leaned over the seat and told the young man, "You stop talking to your sweetheart there and get us to where we're going safely." And so he hung up the phone. Later, Ian said, "I would have never had the courage to tell him that." I said, "Well, he isn't really," he said, "you sounded like his grandma." Thanks, Ian, you know. But no, it was, I never had any problems with taxis. Yeah, it was fine. And I had favorite drivers too, and reliable. And I knew the good taxi services from the bad ones. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, Barbara.
Yes, did you have any language barriers when you went into your interiors?
No, everyone in Guyana speaks English because it was British Guyana until independence in 1966. So even in the interior, people speak English. They still speak their local languages, although that's dying. Local languages are dying globally because of globalization. There are 9 indigenous tribes left in Guyana, and it's a much larger landmass because it's on the continent than any of the other island countries that I lived in. Those are just small sandy spots of land. So 9 tribes. I basically was in Region 2. I was working with people who were either Arawak, Warao, or what was the third one? I'm blanking on it right now. Carib. And then when I was in the interior, it was the Makushi. They were the largest tribe in the south central Guyana. So no, language was never an issue. Yes.
Were the tribes welcoming of Cuso's involvement in, the programs that they were trying to introduce or to get more active?
Yes, because basically we went in and listened to the people who were there and found out, we listened first. The program managers listened to what various government departments or villages or local NGOs wanted, and then we would try and find someone who could come in and supply those skills. In my case, it was the Volunteer Youth Corps wanted to update their strategic plan, and I could do that kind of work from my background in business and administration. So came in, listened to them, met with them. What do you want? What are the programs you have going now? How are they structured? How long have you had them? Did a lot of questioning, and then said, would you had staff meetings, and then worked out a plan that they could implement. And also they wanted to do a 5-year plan, but that sounded a little too Soviet for me. I said, since all of your programs depend on funding from outside sources, companies or USAID or whatever, why don't we just do it for 2 years, but we'll make it so you can fix it later. So that was, it was always a listening process, and we were always in partnership with whoever was that. It was my listening and my being around Indigenous people that cued me that they wanted help in certain areas. And I did help not only with ecotourism, but also with technology. One village really was desperate. They had a cell tower, but they wanted to be able to connect to the internet, because that's how their young people would study for exams to get to high school or get to university and go on to college later, hopefully. So, and I also helped with agriculture. Not that I'm any kind of agriculturalist, but I happen to, well, I won't tell you how that happened, but I was matchmaker. I was also in my theater career, I was Yenta in Fiddler on the Roof. Good. Husbands you want for your daughters? Husbands I can get for your daughters. So I did some matchmaking in Cuso, and I got one village agricultural help.
Good.
Other questions?
Well, tell us about your earrings.
Oh, my earrings. Elmi, stand. I want you to know that Elmi Saltink, my dear friend, was wearing these. And I said, oh, those are great. So I made some pairs, and they're now in all the villages I was in. Don't anyone steal this one, okay? You can pass it around. You'll know it's made from pop tops, those aluminum pop top cans. And then I was also teaching beading and embroidery. I was using handcrafts because the first year we'd been told we're going to be spending a lot of nights home alone. So, you know, I hadn't embroidered since I was a teenager. And that was the back of my birding vest. You can pass that around too, Aggie. That's all that's left of it. So I would, you know, it's just birds and animals and things from Guyana. It was an old Indian denim birding vest with lots of pockets. And the thing was totally falling apart. So I took it apart and tried to remake it with denim, but it wasn't the right quality fabric. That's all that's left of it. Anyway, so that was, and I also taught embroidery and beading skills in villages. And it was a way to get the women and youth together, because part of the Cuso mandate in Guyana was GESI, gender equality and social inclusion. And so women and youth. And yes, it was a good, and it got me talking to people quickly. And so I was able to accomplish a lot in that short period of time. Yes. Yes, Dale.
Did your 4-year process of writing the book and everything involved, did that affect your enjoyable memories of your time there?
No, not at all. It enhanced them. And I went back, I've been journaling ever since my Jamaica days. And so I went in with a nice polished journal. I use them, all sorts of things. Ideas go in, clippings, newspaper clippings, sometimes I do cluster thinking. I'll pass these around, you're welcome to look at what and this was too small of a journal, so then I got something a little bigger. Well, Cuso gave me this notebook, so I'm frugal, you know, I just use what they gave me. You can see the kind of things. And also when I was in boats and canoes on the rivers, I needed something light because I was operating on my day pack. And this fits in a Ziploc bag. So I also, I used smaller books for the same kind of work. But yeah, so I relied, and then when I also did workbooks, again, when space was at a premium and I was in possibly situations where things would get wet, I had workbooks that I used. So what I did was I mined all of that material to remind me of what was there. And with my background in theater, I also remember things that are said and I can replicate them. And so that's what I did. Yes, Diane.
You just mentioned your background in theater?
Yes. I have a master's degree in
Well, of
drama.
course I do. I did, but I mean, I'm just overwhelmed, that's all.
Yeah, I've been associated with professional theater companies. The Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London had a snit fit when I was an undergrad in the late 60s. So John Fernald brought a whole troupe, of Brits over to America and ended up on my college campus, 25 miles north of Detroit, Oakland University. And so
Sorry for all happened.
Okay, thanks Eva, I'll see you later. To earn money for college, I worked on sewing costumes and things on the side, and then they needed a dresser, someone who would work with the professional theater company and supervise students who would help, actors with scene changes, costume changes, and things like that. So yes, I've had that kind of association with professional theater. And I also started a theater company on the coast of Oregon, so that's been going since the mid-70s. And I've worked in a lot of community theaters, and I've done everything in theater. I've been on stage and directed and all of that. So yes, now you know the secret of why I do what I do.
Well, there's that, but I was just gonna say, what book are you writing next?
Yeah.
I've been working on the India book since a year ago, January. I stopped it in about September. Probably I have the dump from about a third of my 12 years worth of journals dumped into a manuscript. That's what you do first. You just write everything. And then you go back through it and hone, you decide what your themes are going to be, what are the things you're going to focus on, and then you pull a lot. It's much easier to pull stuff out than say, well, now what can I creatively do to begin this chapter? Just write it, and it's easier to pare it down after. So it's a book on what the work I was doing in parallel with the Center of Science and Technology for Rural Development. And had the same kind of relationship. Went in, listened to what was going on, asked what help they might want, see if I could provide it myself or find someone who could provide it. That's where being a matchmaker really helps. You do it in all kinds of situations, Mm-hmm.
By the way,
Yes.
you have a beautiful script.
Oh, thank you. Some people can't read it.
And I love your black
Do we have to read the book to find out what
Black
ecotourism is? Do we have to read the book to find out about ecotourism?
Yep, you do.
Okay.
It's one of those things, you don't get it for free. Some of these things, I'm not giving the answers or any hints. Bill?
You know what I'm gonna ask? Well, I'll ask it anyway.
You will sit.
I've never been in Guyana.
Yeah.
And you talk about having to take taxis, including water taxis.
Yes.
What does the river smell like when you're in the water taxi?
This is an inside joke.
He's in my writing group, and he always wants to know, he says, I always want to be on the boat seat, you know. Now that's the most he's asked. I definitely, you're on the boat seat in there, Bill. You never asked me to sniff the river. Depends on whether it's fresh water or salt water, whether the tide's coming in or the tide's going out.
Yeah, but you go to Hawaii and you walk off the plane and you get this whiff of flowers and perfume.
No, it's sunscreen.
Yeah, you get some of that too. You get some of that too. I'm just suspecting you're getting a little bit of that mosquito
repellent and all of that. No, I must admit the water never did it, but you know, I'm old. Maybe my sniffer isn't as good as yours. I think I'm older than you are too, so I've got that on you. I've got that on you.
Did you ever fall out of your hammock?
Yes.
Yeah, she did a lot of sleeping.
No, it happened once. And I did sleep in hammocks when I was in the villages, and I had brought a mosquito net from here in Canada and stitched it around the hammock and arranged so there'd be a zipper. I went all over Georgetown to find a 4-foot zipper, you know, and put it. So anyway, I tried it in first time in because I'd stay with Indigenous families, and I tried. And you've got to get your bottom right in the middle of the hammock, you know, and then you have to just carefully pivot around and get your feet up and your head down, and then that's it. You're basically a corn cob in a husk for the whole night. The problem was I put my bum too far to the far side of the hammock, and I went head over heels on the floor. Tore my mosquito net, had to re-stitch it on. And thank you very much, Julie, for the question.
I think the fact that you slung your hammock in the rainforest and in Indigenous homes and whatnot is very interesting, actually. Okay. And I can see doing it at 21, but at 71, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, it was the closest I've been to a man for a long time. His hammock there in camp was right next to mine, and we'd move a little bit and hip to hip bump. Nice. So, yeah. Secrets.
Changed that, you see.
Yeah, it is. What else are you wondering about?
I'm wondering how successful the ecotourism is, or do you have any results from what happened for you in Guyana, and how much or what can be transferred to our economy here, because that's supposed to be our saving graces for the forests.
Yes, good question, Lynn. We got as far as we could with the 4 young people. They had been to Bina Hill Institute for Youth, and we had applications for them, but the Tushao, the village leader, and I was leaving, so I had to say, you need to get these applications into Bina Hill, and as far as I know, it didn't happen. And unfortunately, no one came in to fill my post in Region 2 when I left. And also, Cuso made a decision to leave Guyana after 55 years in country the following June. And who has my other earring? Oh, Dale has it, thank you. I just want to make sure, in case there are any kleptomaniacs. And so no one followed me, but Cuso closed. That was they just have other foci. I think they're doing more work in Africa. I could never get a clear story as to what happened. But my program manager, Vanessa Thompson, was one of the best bosses I've ever had. And she went on to work with WUSC, which is another Canadian aid organization, World Universities Services of Canada. And she has written to me and said they are pursuing building on the foundation of the ecotourism efforts that we were doing in Guyana. And the magazine that I've just submitted a couple of articles to is all about ecotourism. That's what Guyana is marketing to the world. You know, we are it's about one of about 30 ecological hotspots on the planet, and Guyana is saying we're one of them. Come and see what we have. So how that will translate into our Western way of life, that would be a whole other story. And Julie has also given me the nod that we're coming near time for this to conclude. So we could have maybe one more question, and then I'll kind of wrap it up, and then we can talk as we're doing book signings. So, yes.
Merle, what was
Yeah.
the hardest part of this?
The hardest,
book, yeah.
the hardest part of writing the book? Probably having Julie whipping me. You mean I have to do that? I haven't quite finished with the last one. I think that's still an issue, you know. Yeah, it's ongoing. But then you just heard tonight something I only heard about 3 weeks ago. She said, well, it takes most people, 7 years to do a book. And I said, I didn't half the time. You never told me,
Yeah.
And what she has learned and done in 50 years, compressed into 4. So no wonder I'm a little the way I am, So yes, that was tough. But it's good work. I'm glad to be doing it. I'm amazed at how much interest there is in the book from elsewhere. And I even had my stepdaughter-in-law back in Michigan email me yesterday, and she says, Merle, I've got the book, and she had a photo there of the book right on top of her, her parceling. And then she emailed me this morning. She said, it's great. I'm halfway through it. So, there's wonderful stuff like that.
I'd like to make a comment to tell you how impressed I am by your journals. And I myself am also published lately, so my one and only book. But I picked a lot of my writings out of my journals that I've kept. And I would suggest anybody who's really interested in cleaning up the journal, so to speak, then there are lots of books and stories in our journals if we keep them.
Yes.
And that's where people like Julie are such a big help, because my gosh, it doesn't look like much, but when she waves her magic wand and just pokes you real hard, all of a sudden there's a book.
In our writing group.
So I mean, I give both of you the journaling and the help, encouragement for anybody who wants to write a book.
Thank you so much. That's
Yeah.
great, Barbara. Thank you. I also want to give a great vote of thanks to Julie. When you get your books, you'll see who I dedicated the book to.
Yeah.
Okay, and absolutely, and
I'm blushing.
and you know what happened in BC with COVID when they said folks of our vintage had to have a bubble buddy, and with all the time we were spending together already, we looked at each other and said, well, hello, bubble buddy. It's been that way ever since, Love her dearly. She's been absolutely marvelous in just freely giving of herself to me in learning the writing and publishing process. But I've also given her a great out, because it was a couple of years ago when she indicated she actually didn't want to do writing groups anymore, and she wanted to focus on her golf and her photography and travel and so on. And she was kind of asking me for permission. And I said, Julie, we never said we were going to do this stuff till death do us part. I said, quit. Stop. Do what you want to do. And that's what she's done. But then
and I'm very grateful for her listening to me. She's a great listener.
I had to do it in all the projects I was in. I had to listen a lot, And and so she gets the pleasure of still being involved with writing but there is that horse whipping aspect of it that I experience, but,
I actually thought it was much less than that, and it was more like nagging.
all right, so we each have our own metaphor, our own verb to use. We do have our
But you had
differences.
a much bigger team than just me. There's
Yes,
one, Bruce,
I know.
or
And-
friends,
Yeah, which is just,
Dale, Aggie.
yeah. Well, let me,
Heather.
hey, this is my time, you're.
I'm getting it away
Who's
from
got the
me.
whip now?
What's, yeah, who's whipping who now? But yes, Bruce Butler, published author extraordinaire. Your book is due back to the library by Monday, and I'm just in the last 60 pages. Into the Labyrinth, who else has written Into the Labyrinth?
Of course I read it.
Well, yes, you read it, of course, your husband is in it. Boy, James does not come off too terribly well in your book. It's about laying that cable, that
Under
Arctic
the
cable, back in, it was the 90s, yeah, in the 90s, and all that was involved in developing the equipment and, you know, having teams with all different capacities of responsibility work through it. An amazing book, highly technical, and it was the reason that Julie introduced me to Bruce is he's also working on a science fiction novel now, which I'm
Is it done?
Yes, yes. He's almost done, but he knew about Kindle Direct Publishing, and Julie hadn't done it for 10 years. So Bruce was really helpful in just getting me started on it. I'm not that great a technical person, but well, it's done, it's done. And Dale has your book. I wasn't sure if you could make it. He's also building his own house and has designed energy efficient systems of all kinds that are going into that house. And Dale has your book. I wasn't sure if you could make it. Wrapped it up.
I know where you live.
No, your book's here. It's all here. And also, yes, Aggie has been great in just coming in and making sure everybody's greeted. Our super greeter, Aggie, and Aggie Stevens.
Also a writer.
Also a writer, also a friend, and pitching in to help. And Dale has also been helping. She's going to be in charge of the money. So collecting the money, and Julie's explained how it's going to work out.
You also did the final proofread.
She also did the first reading of the manuscript way back in probably the summer of 2019. It was about 2/3 roughed in. Dale saw it then, and she did the final proofing of it also for me. So kudos to Dale. She's really been a real supporter. And Laurie is here with, I think all the blood's run out of her fingers because she's videotaping this, bless her heart, you know. And we're hoping to get it on Instagram. There's some people who can't be here tonight, so thank you all for that. Have I missed anybody? Oh, I already thanked Elmi. I think, well, most of all, I thank all of you for being here. It's been wonderful.
And thank you.